We'd like to welcome everyone to our winter SmartCom Summit, Smart Connections. You've already had an opportunity as an audience to view a number of our other sessions and keynotes, and we thank you for that. And we have another great one today. We're going to be focusing today on why marketing matters. It's not all about the technology. It's not all about the product development. At the end of the day, you've got to sell this stuff. And so we have a great panel today of real global experts that have been out there and done that. And so I'm really excited to learn from them on the do's and the don'ts of how we can be successful with all this new technology that we're working on these days. So let me start with some introductions. First of all, we have Jen Singer. Jen, could you give us a little introduction here?
Sure. I'm Jen. I'm the Chief Connection Officer at Medium Giant, which is a media and marketing company that specializes in strategic, creative, and media services. And we look for brands. We work with brands that are focused on growth. So a little bit about my background. I spent a ton of time in traditional media, marketing technology, and spent a couple years as COO for a CSP and a CPaaS platform called Tally.
Excellent, excellent. No, I think it's interesting that you have both of those elements of experience. So glad you're here. All right, next we have Carlos Aragon. Carlos, could you give us a quick introduction?
Sure. I'm Carlos Aragon. I'm originally from Spain, so if I have a little accent, you're going to have to bear with it. I'm the Associate Vice President of Product and Partner Marketing at Mavenir. And a little bit of background on me. Well, first of all, Mavenir is a company that provides solutions for communication service providers. So part of those solutions include CPaaS and other services, but basically enable carriers with white label solutions to go to market. And I have 20 years of experience doing product marketing in the telco space, but particularly the last 8 years, I've been heavily exposed to CPaaS and customer engagement with Mavenir and previously with Candy, which was a ribbon communications company that provided kind of white label CPaaS solutions too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You've got so much experience working with carriers and CSPs around the world and helping them launch these new products. So look forward to getting a little insider information from you from that side. Last but obviously not least, we have Gwen Lafage. Gwen, please share a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm Gwen Lafage. I'm VP of Content and Brand at Sinch. Sinch is one of the biggest CPaaS providers. So we are the customer engagement platform or customer communication platform. A bit about me, I started my career in advertising agencies, so more on the consumer side, before working for a smaller agency in San Francisco focused on B2B tech companies. And that's where I started working with some of the biggest SaaS players in the market, including Snowflake, for example. And in the past couple of years, I've worked at Sinch at the head of brand and content.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I like the fact that we have such a global panel as well, because our audience is absolutely global in who we're talking to today. So again, appreciate everyone participating and joining us here. So we've had a number of these sessions, and I've had the opportunity to talk to a number of different companies. And I'm curious for this group, as we look at CPaaS and customer engagement as a critical growth industry, analysts are saying that we've entered about $15 billion in market. And we think we're going to go to 25 to 30 billion over the next 4 or 5 years. So it's going to be, we're going to double very quickly here. And those are really, really big numbers. But Gwen, you're coming from a well-known CPaaS player here in Sinch. How would you define CPaaS? What does it mean to you and to Sinch?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we see CPaaS as like the cloud-based platform or the services and APIs that allow businesses to like communicate, engage, and create or have meaningful conversations with their audiences through any type of channels or communications media. So it could be like email, voice, messaging, all the different device that people use everywhere on the planet. So I think that's what CPaaS is. It's like allowing businesses to really engage with their user and engaging users to have these two-way conversations with brands.
Absolutely, absolutely. Two-way conversation becomes a conversation. One way is not a conversation, which is historically where we've been with a lot of the technology. So Carlos,
well,
you
and
mentioned
fake two-way conversations, right? You know, all of the chat bots.
Well,
there is that.
Yeah, that's part of it, I think, right? Like, and I think that's the thing. It's like a conversation can start one way and evolve into more of an exchange. And I think that's what CPaaS is allowing to really engage audiences in the way that they want to be engaged or in the way they want to communicate with brands.
That's right. So Carlos, you've been involved with CPaaS for the last 8 years, as you mentioned. As you look at that evolution, how would you define CPaaS today, maybe compared to where it was, 6 or 7 years ago when you were still at Candy?
So 6 or 7 years ago, we basically defined CPaaS mostly for developers as a tool or a set of a toolkit to kind of automate things. Today, the way I see it, because some other kind of components have been integrated into CPaaS, but today the way I see it is as a transformation of our communication models. Traditionally in the past, the way that consumers and companies communicated were through fixed channels and normally with fixed ways of using it. Like if you were going to talk to a company, you had to use a phone. If you wanted to message them, you had to use either text messages or email. And with CPaaS, what you do is basically you take all of the different communication capabilities, cut them into little pieces, and then provides ways that the companies can integrate those communications into their regular business flow so that they can not only start communications on the channel of choice for the consumer at a certain time, whatever channel is convenient for them, and also be able to keep track of all those interactions on those different channels on a common profile, but also so that you can add or remove participants into those conversations based on the needs, whether those participants are people or those participants are going to be automations or chatbots or other kind of sources of information that can help kind of remove the friction and make that interaction between the consumer and the business easier and more productive.
Right. Now that's right on. So, Jen, as you look at this, I think of CPaaS as the technology stack behind this. What's important to you as you look at customer engagement and how the technology helps provide that?
Yeah, I mean, like Carlos, seeing that transition and shift from it being so focused on the APIs, the developers, the technical components of CPaaS. And I think really the critical piece, especially in messaging about what it is what it does for brands. And so, you gave us this prompt. And so I wrote down something that came to mind. So CPaaS brings easy to use communication tools and channels to companies wanting to accelerate engagement and connection with their customers. And I think that's, really ultimately it's taking something that's very, very complicated and allowing brands to be able to connect and communicate with their end users. So it's really bringing it, CPaaS allows communication tools to be brought to the masses.
I agree. But it's still a relatively new technology, right? And I think we're also seeing a lot of companies deploying it for the first time. So it may not have been their core competency or their main service in the past. And so it's something new. And so as we look around, there's room for some improvement when it comes, I think, to branding and the execution around some of the marketing of the new technology. Now, I think there's a broader conversation to be had too, not just around CPaaS, but technology companies in general. Jen, what would be a common mistake, or what, as you're working, you have a lot of clients out there where you're helping them improve their marketing. what are some of the common mistakes that you see, maybe generally, when you meet with clients that you might make our audience aware of that we might want to avoid?
I'm big on think about the end customer, right? And I think what a lot of our clients, they have all kinds of initiatives, they have messaging, but what they're not doing is truly understanding and analyzing their own customer segments, what types of customers are doing what with certain types of products, and being able to have messaging strategies by segment. I think that oftentimes we get really broad in our messaging, and so I think that's one of the biggest valuable things that you have as an asset of an organization. You have customer data, you have access to your customers, you have access to be able to reach out and utilize them. I mean, I'm sure, Carlos, with all of your product marketing, you do a lot of customer conversations and interviews. But that's, I think, just low-hanging fruit is understanding who you're talking to and why.
Okay, good. Gwen, you've had a really interesting role, I think, at Sinch. I've lost track of the number of acquisitions that Sinch has had over the last 24 months. And so I have to imagine you've had a really interesting perspective with different cultures, different countries, of, what someone brought as a brand versus where you needed to transform that. And so I thought you might have a couple of anecdotes here that the audience could learn from. You don't have to mention which subsidiaries you've acquired that might be, a little bit on the needy side, but it'd be great if you could kind of share a little bit of your experience there and how that's helped evolve into the Sinch brand.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's it's been a very interesting journey at Sinch, right? I think, and it's probably a journey that a lot of CSPs or communication provider are going through. It's if we look at the history of Sinch, we started as an SMS aggregator, right? That's kind of years back where we were a provider of SMS, of a bulk SMS in a way. We've transformed into a major CPaaS provider, and what that means is that now we encompass all the different communication channels, and through those acquisitions, we keep adding solutions for our customers, because I think the future of CPaaS is definitely to have this kind of omni-channel approach, right? It's not just about SMS, it's how you can really combine messaging, email, voice together, and that's the journey that we've been going on at Sinch. From a brand perspective, that is about changing the positioning and making a shift on how you present who you are and who you sell to, right? I think that's also one of the big shifts. It's when we mentioned that CPaaS initially was very focused on developers, Sinch has always been more focused on the business user versus some of our competitors that might be kind of developer first. I think we've been more focusing on the business users, and but we've had to have that brand shift and positioning shift, and we're still going through that because some of those acquisitions are pretty recent. How do we define ourselves in the market? And I think one of the common mistake is definitely trying to be everything to everyone, and also not having those foundation in place on what your brand stand for, what is kind of your value proposition before you go to market. And we see a lot of brands and a lot of tech companies focusing on performance marketing and ads without knowing what that core messaging and positioning is. So in a way, I think that's a very common mistake, right? Focusing on activity and doing without having those foundations, like Jen said, around the customers, right? Understanding your customers and building this messaging around them. So I think just for some of the anecdote, I guess, around Sinch, because you asked about that too, we've looked at each acquisition in a very different way. And obviously we're still going through some of the consolidation on how we bring together all of those amazing solution and amazing team that we brought in. And that's a journey. Like the Sinch brand, each new solution, each new brand or product we acquire will be there to build up the Sinch brand. And we are going through that journey right now. Like, what is our new positioning, which we just did a big work on at the end of last year, and how do we transform some of the companies that we acquire? So some brands that we've acquired will get retired. You asked about Intelliquent, for example, I think is a voice provider in the US, and the Intelliquent brand will disappear and become fully Sinch. Some other acquisition, we might keep some of the product brands because they resonate with certain audience as part of the Sinch portfolio. So a big work on the brand architecture, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, it's a huge undertaking, and so I'm always following along to see the progress and how that's coming together. So Carlos, you might have the most unique view of this of all. If I remember, I think Mavenir has 200 plus customers that are deploying new services. And again, you don't have to name names unless you want to, but you probably have a long list of do's and don'ts of what you've seen work and not work with your many different customers over the years.
Well, the biggest don't that I have in here and that I see constantly on the communication service provider front is communication service providers are normally driven by engineers, by technology. And we tend to, I'm an engineer myself. I moved to marketing a long time ago, but my background is an engineer. That's my engineering degree up there. So I'm a telecom engineer particularly. And we tend to take the problems as something that technology can resolve. We tend to focus too much on the technology, okay, I need to deploy CPaaS. Fine, I'm going to talk to a CPaaS vendor. I'm going to do an RFQ. I'm going to do a huge, evaluation of vendors, and then I'm going to select the deployment. Okay, fine. I got my CPaaS. Now what do I do with it? That's when they start figuring out how to monetize the CPaaS. So that the core team deploys a solution and then gives it to their product team to figure out how to make money out of it. And the product team normally has other priorities, or maybe their priorities now just increase their SMS take rate and their wholesale numbers. So they either put it in back burner or they try to incorporate it into what they know how to do today. And then they fail to realize the full potential. And that's kind of what the nice messages I always give when I play with these communication service providers. If everything you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. That's a problem they have. Right. If everything they're used to is doing SMS, then when you bring a CPaaS with all sorts of capabilities for real-time communications, for video, for rich messaging and all those things, they don't really know not just how to use it, but how to position it in the market. So the way to fix this is to start the approach as a global project where you bring the marketing people, where you bring your product people together with the guys that are going to implement the technology, and then come up with, okay, what is the market need that we have at the moment? Marketing has a big play in there to identify use cases, to identify market segmentation, profiles of people and companies, different sizes of companies that can benefit from the technology, and then decide what can be offered for each of them, because everything cannot be cookie cutter. Like Gwen mentioned, there is other competitors that have been focusing too much on developers. And that's okay when you deal with people that build custom solutions for larger corporations like big banks or big insurance companies. But when you're dealing with smaller players that are providing maybe tools for florists or for smaller kind of businesses, what they're looking for more than APIs is some sort of like pre-cut tools that let them achieve, outcomes, achieve objectives. And sometimes that is being able to run, offers or campaigns or specials on a messaging channel. Sometimes it is actually implementing something quick to allow people to provide feedback or to ask about the delivery or to track their delivery or things like that. And they don't necessarily understand the technology. And that's where the CSP can be that glue, can provide the nexus between the complexity in the technology to this is how I'm going to solve your problem. Marketing is a key part in that because we help understand the use cases, understand the market, and do the segmentation. And then we also help when we have figured out the product that we're going to put there, how to reach those people, how to present the value proposition, and how to facilitate that kind of transaction.
Absolutely.
And before we move on, can we just, as a global mistake, from positioning, messaging, all the jargon, like the acronyms, the things that like we are still marketing to developers, and we have to really remember, a CFO might be actually making this decision, or, how do we make it more simple, communicate and convey the problem? But I mean, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I love this. I think, like, as I mentioned, we recently went through like a exercise of re-evaluating our positioning, because obviously Sinch have transformed itself in the past couple of years, and we did ask, like, in prospect groups, like ask people to react around some terms and around CPaaS, for example. And I think that's a good example. Is like when you ask people, okay, should Sinch position itself as being like a CPaaS provider? And especially the non-technical audience are like, no, what does that even mean, right? Like, I think even the core of this discussion, and we're talking about CPaaS, and what is CPaaS, right? We started there. And I think I agree with all that jargon. We have to remember that even if we're selling technology, we still selling to people. And as in the same way as we don't want to focus so much on the technology and the API, we want to focus on what are the benefits, right? Like, and the benefits of like we talk about engaging with customer, the communication side of things, the meaningful conversations, rather than like the technical side of what the product actually does. So I think that's definitely still a very common mistake.
I agree. In fact, usually line 2, when I do sales training for new CSPs and others that might be launching this technology, the first lesson is never use the word CPaaS in a sales call.
Yes.
So, right? So CPaaS is the awesome technology, but it belongs under the hood. And so that was a bit of a trick question when I asked what is CPaaS at the beginning, because I almost expected one of you, Jen's done now in the middle of our conversations, like, we don't even need the term CPaaS, right? It's an acronym that really nobody knows. So that might actually be the first mistake, and a big mistake is I am a CPaaS, and you market as such, and you limit your audience to about 2 people that understand what that means. So good.
I think it's way more important to really think about what it does for people versus what it is.
Yeah.
And the role of the marketer for this is to be able to translate that from technical to real people.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. That's right. To kind of follow up on that, Jen, because that's really, it's a culture change, which then builds into the brand, right? And so maybe share a few thoughts around, how do you change a brand, or how do you develop a new brand? In Gwen's case, she's taking old brands and turning them into new brands. So let's have a little bit of conversation, because I think this is a critical point as companies transition from stodgy old telephone company to innovative, smart comm type of company. So maybe Jen, kick us off around on some thoughts around branding.
Yeah, and I mean, I think before you get into building a full brand platform, like what's your essence and your voice and your promise and your values, is really understanding and being clear on why you're doing this. Who are you doing this for? And I think a lot of companies might not, when you really get down to the core of it, don't really have that very, very clear and succinct answer. So obviously it's that business goal, that business need, the why you exist as that base layer. And then as you start to think, especially in this context, we're talking to current companies, you already have a name, a website, you're not going to be changing any of those things. But a brand, in my opinion, is really that expression of who you are as a company, and how are you reiterating that through all of your different channels, your connection pieces of that true essence of who you are. So I think it's start there. And then there's all kinds of different exercises. I mean, I've already talked about analyze your customers, understand your stakeholders, get as much information as you possibly can. And then it always has to, so that helps you develop a target audience. And then from there, messaging, creative, all of that can stem out of it. But it's really, what do you stand for as a brand? And what kind of personality does that brand have?
Right. So Gwen, as you have been involved in so many branding exercises through your career, what are a couple of high-level thoughts do you think would be beneficial for our audience here today?
So I, definitely starting with the foundation on defining that positioning and having that unified story that everyone can rally around. And I think then it starts by how you bring that brand into market, right? Like, how do you bring that story into market? It starts internally. Once you have it, it starts about trying to unify people around that unified story, because I think there's a mistake with brand when you feel like, oh yeah, the brand is the logo and a couple of colors, right? Like that's what people will think. But at the core of it, it's mostly the story you tell, right? Like what you stand for and what you want to be known for. Like I often explain brand as being your reputation. And so there's things you control and things you don't control. But there's things you control at that kind of story and how you want people to see yourself. So then once you have done that exercise internally and people have understood that story, then you need to kind of have the same exercise externally. And that goes through, of course, talking to your customers and your prospect in the market, but also analysts, journalists, like how you make them understand what you're about. And especially when you want that shift to happen, I think analysts play a pretty interesting role, and that's why like the CPaaS part or the CPaaS word is still there, because that's how they position it, right? So I think is also trying to put you on the map for what you want to be known for, and finding how you differentiate versus people that might be categorized in the same way as you are. So I think that would be some of the step to take in my mind. Of course, there's a lot on how you develop a brand and how you build a strong brand in the market, like through content and becoming a trusted advisor, talking about what you know, supporting people, right? I think from giving like the knowledge and sharing your knowledge, I think is very important part. Building a community, I think there's a lot of different ways, but at the core of it, the messaging, the story, and unifying everyone around it is the challenge.
And I would like to add, there is also another significant aspect, is that when we look at communication service providers in particular, the problem with their brand is that the brand stands for a lot of things. So, and I'm going to use the same example that we have here in Mavenir. Mavenir does a lot of solutions. We provide a lot of different technologies. So we tend to always use the Mavenir brand and then use some sort of descriptive name for a product or a solution, which in the end goes back to Jen's point. We end up flooding the market with acronyms. So the Mavenir IP Multimedia is a system, Mavenir IMS, the Mavenir this and that. When we started taking over the enterprise solutions and we understood that the audience was different, even though we had a unified communication solutions, we decided to bring it to market with the name Mavenir Connect, because that's what it does. It connects people in the business or connects the business to people outside. When we brought our contact center solution, we came up with Mavenir Care. Officially, it was the Mavenir Contact Center as a Service. But when we brought it to market, it was Mavenir Care. And as part of our, acquisition of Telestacks, the composition of merging Telestacks into our solution, what we were considering is whether we should name it Mavenir Engage, because in the end, it's more that, what CPaaS really is, it's an engagement platform for businesses to be able to integrate the communications into their processes to talk to other people. So it's the same case. When you are building that brand, you need to think, okay, is my master brand going to be sufficient? Or do I have to create an emotional sub-brand that I can either pair with my brand, like Mavenir Engage, or I can just come up with a completely different brand that serves its purpose? Like, just give you the example, the Coca-Cola company owns a lot of brands, because when people want to have an orange drink, they don't want to drink Coca-Cola Orange. They want to drink Fanta. So, and that there is a point on having that brand. It's part of the same company, but they're not using Coca-Cola for it, they're using Fanta. So same thing, if you're a big carrier, you have so many solutions that when you're going to bring this CPaaS to market, you do your market research and you understand that maybe it's better to launch with a separate brand. Go ahead and do it. You can always say, I don't know, whatever brand you want to put, and then powered by at the bottom, powered by Verizon, AT&T, Telefonica, whatever you want to put in there. But that's super important is you bring marketing from the beginning to help you figure that out. Because in the end, even though we try to always use data for everything, the reality is people buy from people and we buy biased by emotion. And the brand is a significant chunk of that emotion.
Yeah. Carlos, I just want to echo, I think that you separating the difference between product branding and corporate branding is really important, because you can have a product that is going to be more technical, but that corporate brand is really where you get the opportunity to do storytelling, to have ambitious goals, to have an ambitious vision. I love Twilio's brand positioning statement, which is empower others. Infobip, which is world connected. Vonage. Now we're talking. This is kind of it just allows you to do a lot more, especially as you start to think of product marketing and go to market. Because if you're empowering others, then you're going to have tool sets and product sets that are going to go with that main character and brand.
And I would say that very few companies actually have the power, the bandwidth, and the resources to be building several brands. So I think that's one of those challenges we're facing as Sinch, right? Obviously, because we've grown both organically, but also through acquisition, we inherit a lot of existing brand, and there's all this exercise on where do they fit within the portfolio? Do we keep them as product brands versus the main Sinch brand, and how they will all contribute to building the one Sinch brand in the future? And I think that's exactly the same exercise that you described for Mavenir, but with existing brand there. So instead of maybe naming it Sinch Connect, we might have to use whatever product brand we inherited, because there's already positive association to that product and they become a product brand rather than a company brand. But I think that it's quite important for tech companies in general. And I think that's something that sometimes is not understood correctly, is the power that the brand has, right? They feel yeah, we can do marketing, but we're doing marketing. Look, we're doing paid ads and we have a website, but then they're not telling that bigger story, and then not connecting the dots, right? So I think it's like you said, building this emotional connection based on the benefits and the problem you're solving rather than what the technology actually does, because again, no one really care about the technology itself, right? It's something to remember. It's no one cares about you, right? Everybody cares about themselves, and I think we're all in the same boat here. And what we care is what that solution can do for us, right? How it can help us connect with our customers and improve customer experience by adding the technology. But the technology as such, yeah.
No, you're correct. What they care about is they don't care about you. They care about how you make them feel. Ultimately, that's it. And you make them feel satisfied that they're fulfilling their objectives. You make them feel comfortable because everything is easy, versus you make them feel angry because they're trying to do something and they cannot do it, or they can figure out, or maybe it's too expensive, or maybe it's not convenient, whatever it is. But it's about, as the marketing prime for that solution, is you need to figure out how you can emotionally connect with that audience.
And I think that there's an upside to investing in your brand, because it starts to take, with a really strong brand, people want to have that emotional connection with you. They like the story, they recognize, they see themselves, but it starts to lessen that price conversation. So instead of being such a commodity, you have a story around what you wanted. And so in a really competitive marketplace where price and every little .000 matters, it gives you the ability to be a little bit more expensive because you're providing a different type of experience.
And I think it's just like I say a lot that brand drive demand and also makes everything else easier, because obviously when your sales team calls someone and the response is like, who? I've never heard about you. The discussion is going to be very tricky. Well, when you call in, they say, oh yeah, I've heard about Sinch. I've read your piece about omni-channel communication. I loved it. Well, then you get your way in, right? The door is open. So I think that's where brand takes such a big importance, is telling also those story and opening doors, right? It makes the rest a lot easier.
This is great input. I really appreciate the experience and the thoughts that you've shared here, particularly on this question, because I think that's where a lot of organizations, not just in the telecom space, but in the tech space in general, these are challenges that we have. I think it really takes leadership from those of us that are leading the marketing teams, because in many ways we're the glue that ties into the sales team and the product team and the technology team, and have to get those data points and internalize them ourselves so that we understand the product. We also have to understand the market. And then we have to turn around and really convince the rest of the organization that this is who we are, so that they, have a good swallow of that yummy Kool-Aid and are out there, on the street, really sharing the essence of who you are as an organization. So I really appreciate everyone's time today. Any last thoughts, Gwen? What's on the personal basis? What's on your calendar over the next coming weeks? Anything fun and interesting that you're planning?
Oh, on the personal side, let me think about it. Actually, next week we have something pretty fun at school when they're doing my kids' school, when they have like an international night where a lot of families represent different countries. I thought that was quite fun. Like me and my family will have a kind of table to represent France, and there's like a lot of different country represented in the school. I thought that was pretty fun.
Very nice. Jen, what's coming up for you?
Well, I was just telling Carlos, who is from Spain, that I'm headed to Spain at the end of March. So my focus is figuring out how to learn at least a little bit of conversational Spanish in the next 2 months. And so that's a big thing for us. Right.
And Carlos, I know you're going to Spain for another reason, but that might be all-consuming. What are you up to?
Well, I'm for 2 reasons. When you're in the CSP space and you are in the marketing team, your life stops in November, because everything revolves around preparing for the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. That happens at the last week of February. So that's been my life over the last few months. But on the personal note, that's my opportunity, because even after the long hours, and the GSMA has decided to increase the hours again, now the show is from 7 in the morning until 9 p.m., 14 hours. I'm going to shoot myself. But the light at the end of the tunnel, what keeps me going, is that come Thursday, when the show is over, I'm going to take a train to Madrid, and I'm going to be able to go visit my parents and see some of my friends there, enjoy some of the nice food, relax and chill out, and then come back a week later. So I'm going to be able to take at least a week, well, and including the weekend, about 10 days to enjoy Spain. So I'm not jealous of Jen, because I know what she's going to do. I know what she's going to enjoy.
I'm jealous now. I want to go to Spain, and I love Barcelona. I went to MWC last year, not going this year, but I think there's still opportunities, right? I know the shows and the days are very long, but the evening and the nightlife in Barcelona is fun. You can have tapas and enjoy some good after work.
Well, I mean, nothing in Barcelona starts until 11 p.m. anyway, right? So you're not
exactly
anything.
Yeah, 9 p.m. You don't have to wait that late, but 9 p.m. Like, you don't expect to go to a restaurant at 7 and have dinner. It's not going to happen. They're still cleaning lunch.
Yeah,
that's right. Well, that's awesome. I'm hoping to be at MWC myself as well. So there'll be 3 of us that'll be in Spain at some point over the next month or so. And as everyone shared, that's one of my favorite destinations as well. So once again, Thank you to the panel. Thank you to all of those that listened. Feel free to reach out to myself or anyone here with any follow-up questions. We'd love to engage. Follow us on LinkedIn, and we can engage there. And so this has been Kevin Nethercott from the CPaaS Acceleration Alliance, thanking everyone for being here. And we'll get together again soon. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.